Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi, Robert Martin and Nasser al-Mashni. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Australia's only radio program that is totally dedicated to the Palestinian cause in English language. In today's episode, we will be listening to a group of interviews that Nasser and Robert made for us during their visit and participation at the BDS conference in Sydney 2 weekends ago. Stay with us and enjoy the episode. Good morning, Nasser and Robert.
Morning, Yusuf.
Good morning, everybody.
I think we should apologize for not having a fresh episode last week, but we're back this week.
Absolutely.
And this week episode is an interesting one. Robert and Nasser went to Sydney 2 weekends ago for the BDS conference, and here we go. So what could you tell us about the conference, Nasser?
The conference was BDS, Driving Global Justice for Palestine. It was the national conference at the University of Sydney over 2 days, Friday and Saturday. And it was a phenomenal event. And look, from my perspective, you know, as an Australian Palestinian, we had over 200 participants from around Australia and New Zealand. We had international guests from the United States, Malaysia, a couple of other countries. We had Indigenous people, females, Jews, Palestinians, a wide variety of views on BDS, where the movement is today, where it's going, what we need to do collectively to advance the cause of the Palestinians.
I think also it was a huge thing just getting it on.
Now, Nasser and Robert, you did fantastic interviews. So tell us about what we are going to hear next now in general.
So we interviewed a dozen different participants within the conference, and they're all academics and much learned people. And we asked them a couple of questions. The first one was what they thought the highlight was of the event. And secondly, we thought we'd ask them what they would like to share as a takeaway for our listeners.
Just on that too, before we hear from all of those people, I wanted to ask you, Nasser, what was one of your highlights?
For me, the highlight in the first instance was the fact that the university didn't cave in. And if you have a think about internationally, whether it's the University of Exeter not allowing Ilan Pape's talk to go ahead, if you think about Finkelstein not getting tenure in New York,
Yes.
Traditionally, what should be the bastions of free thought, of challenging society and culture, free thinking, where that's supposed to be, universities have ceased to be that since those Halicon days. And for the University of Sydney not to buck under the pressure, and it would have been very intense, alumni, state government, local government pressure as to why are you allowing this to happen. For it, to happen, and for such a coalition of really important voices to get in one space, that was the magnificent highlight. But then from there, the takeaways, you know, Samah Sarawi had a really moving opening, opened the conference with a moving personal recount of her own personal story through Palestine and her father, and that journey through Gaza to Australia. But then, you know, Ghassan Haj and so many others, you know, Jake Lynch, Stuart Rees, and these people are going to share their thoughts as well. But I think we'll leave it to them to tell us what the best bits were.
And in about half a minute, Robert, if I ask you the same question, what are your highlights? What can you tell us?
My highlight was the amount of people that turned up. I thought it was fantastic to be able to mingle with those sorts of people. They're very, very smart academics. They explain about BDS and why it's not anti-Semitic and why we have to do it and we don't have any really other options. And the greatest thing about BDS that I took away from it is some people don't have to do something. It's about not doing something. So not buying from certain stores, not doing these sort of things, which is a really, really good way for people to get involved.
Without further delay, let's listen to the group of interviews that Nasser and Robert made for us.
Dr. David Brophy is a lecturer of modern Chinese history. He provides new insights into the social and political history of China and its inner Asian neighbours, as well as connections with the Islamic, Russian and Soviet worlds. We begin by asking David what his highlight of the conference thus far is.
The highlight so far has been hearing from campaigns in places that we just don't hear from very often. For example, the speaker from New Zealand, speaker from Malaysia was really interesting. There's, they're right in our neighbourhood, but there's a whole, a lot of differences in the questions that they confront there, and that was really interesting.
I was particularly impressed with yours and Michael's time together and the challenge, the disparate views that you had, but also the opportunity for challenging each other.
Yeah, we've actually shared a panel on very similar topics prior to this, so it was a bit of a repeat performance. Criticism of specific tactics that the BDS activists have adopted is always welcome. We can always learn from past campaigns, what's gone right, what's gone wrong, and Michael, I know his commitment to seeking a solution and justice in Palestine is unshaking. From my own personal point of view, I think once you adopt a tactic such as BDS, a boycott is by definition something that involves a certain commitment that you stick to. It has principles that come attached to it that are worth maintaining. Otherwise, it's not really a boycott.
And one piece of advice that you'd give our listeners?
I would, seek alternative sources of information about what's going on in Israel, Palestine. Find out what activities are taking place in your local area. Even very small things like stopping to talk to activists on the street is something that can be extremely encouraging and is very welcome from the community of activists. So.
Thanks so much. Associate Professor Jake Lynch is Chair of the Department of Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Sydney, an executive member of the Sydney Peace Foundation and Secretary-General of the International Peace Research Association. He's also Senior Research Fellow of the School of Communication at the University of Johannesburg and a member of Sydney staff for boycott, divestment and sanctions. Thanks, Jake. What's your highlight of the conference thus far?
I think it's the overall sense that we are at a high watermark of BDS activism here in Australia. We've heard a lot of anecdotes of individual successes, people who have joined in campaigns to draw attention to the complicity of multinationals such as Veolia and G4. People who've campaigned against the secret Dead Sea Cosmetics. People who've campaigned successfully for boycotts in academia. For example, here in the University of Sydney with our campaign against the so-called Israel Research Day. But these up to now have all been disjointed and individual incidents. What's great here is the determination to fashion those into a platform that's going to allow us to organise much more successfully in the future.
Fantastic. And if you're going to give our listeners one piece of advice, what would it be?
I suppose the advice is that the boycott movement allows all of us the opportunity to join in. And if you're in a university, for example, then do your best to find out what are the institutional links between your own university and those in Israel, because things being as they have been in Australia, the chances are quite high that there will be some. And the first step is to draw attention to them, because a lot of these links flourish and thrive in secret, unaccountable spaces, and when a light is shone on them, it sometimes becomes much more difficult to sustain them, and that's when things can get interesting.
Jessica Morrison is the Executive Officer of the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network, APAN, and she has been involved in peace and justice movements for many years. She's been with APAN since 2011. She has taught extensively in social work and community development fields, and has been a member of the Christian Peacemaker team, and in early 2015 spent 6 weeks serving with them in Hebron in Palestine. Jess, can you tell us your highlight of the conference thus far?
Oh, look, I think overall the fact that the movement is mature and smart and can reflect about what it's good at and what it's not so good at, and the fact that we embrace our diversity, you know, Jew, Muslim, atheist, Christian, straight, gay, brown, white, like all of us together are able to have a mature conversation about this tactic of BDS for the sake of Palestinian human rights.
Fantastic, Jess. And a takeaway for our listeners, one thing that you'd tell them to take home with?
It's time for the people movement to be proactive. Like, let's not wait till there's another massacre in Gaza. Let's take up the cause so maybe there doesn't have to be another massacre in Gaza before the world wakes up.
Fantastic. Now, listeners, Jessica had an instrumental part in this, and so a huge thank you to her and for all her efforts. Thanks so much, Jess.
Thanks, NASA.
Dr. Lucia Sorbera is a senior lecturer in the Department of Arabic Language and Cultures at the University of Sydney. Her research focuses on contemporary political and cultural history of North Africa and the Middle East, with a specific focus on women and gender. Lucia, thank you for joining us. Can you tell me your biggest highlight of the event so far?
Well, this is a big event. There are, numbers of speakers talking about different themes and topics. Today I was very impressed by the session about arts and cultures and BDS, and how the speakers related performing arts and art history to political activism and political history. I think these are underrepresented issues in both in academia and in activism, and they are becoming prominent and important.
Fantastic. And Lucia, if we're going to give our listeners a takeaway, something you've learned, what's something you'd like our listeners in their own activism to take away?
Well, it is important to relate the question of Palestine and Israel to the world. And I think this is what has been done in the context of this conference. In these days we have been talking about not only about Palestine and Israel, but also about the neoliberal trends in academia and how they affect the attitude of academics towards politics and towards their way of outreaching the public beyond academia. I think these are very important issues that we all should address.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucia.
Michael Brill's a regular columnist for the New Matilda. He has written for a range of other publications, including Overland, Crikey, ABC's Drum, The Guardian and elsewhere, and shares the honour of being denounced in Parliament by the Member of Israel, Michael Danby.
Michael, can you tell me what your highlight of the event so far of the conference?
I think Samar's speech at the beginning was very beautiful. I gave a talk to her and I can't speak in the kind of poetic and beautiful way that she does. So that was really a pleasure. And I enjoyed giving my speech. Maybe that's a bit arrogant, but, I guess when I know that I have to give a talk, it's something that I think about all day. And I think that one of the really good things that I find about Palestine Solidarity is I think people are very open to criticism. So, I disagree with quite a lot of the people in the audience, and people come up to me afterwards and they say, look, I disagree with a lot of that or all of that, but they still feel like they got something out of that. And I think that's a really positive sign for a movement.
Absolutely. And speaking, having heard your paper, Michael, the opportunity for critical analysis of the BDS movement, I think you gave a great talk and really opened up a conversation there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Dr. Nick Reamer is a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Arts and Social Science at the University of Sydney and is one of the organisers of the conference and a member of Sydney Staff for Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions. Nick's research interests include history and philosophy of linguistics, modern English language, especially verb semantics, meaning in language, semiotic theory, language and subjectivity, especially the place of emotion in theories of language. My goodness.
Nick, can you tell me what you've taken away as the best part of the conference thus far? We're one day in.
Well, look, Nasser, I think the fact that it's happening, is no small deal. We were seriously concerned that the Israel lobby here would just try and shut us down, and we know that pressure was exerted on Sydney Uni to make that happen. To their credit, they, resisted it, and the conference has gone ahead, and I'd really like to see this setting the precedent of, a regular conference at Sydney Uni or some other uni in Australia where we can subject the BDS campaign to the kind of, thought that it needs if it's going to succeed. So for me, that's the big deal about it.
Yeah, absolutely. A great deal of kudos to yourself and the organisers, Nick. Nick, and a takeaway. What do you think the best takeaway so far for our listeners that you could give to them from the conference thus far?
I think we've heard a lot of debate that's been really fruitful about how political change happens, and I think Yousef's plenary that we've just heard triggered a real discussion in the audience. Yousef was pushing the line that we need to do more lobbying. The audience was pushing back the line at him, and you were as well, Nasser, and I agree with it, actually, that what we need to do is to, work with the grassroots. And we need to talk about pressure on politicians. Nothing's going to happen in the US, in Congress, or here in Parliament without politicians actually being forced to. And that's where the role, I think.
Dr. Nigel Parsons is a senior lecturer at the School of People, Environment and Planning. Nigel's research focuses on Palestinian institutions. He is currently researching Israeli population management understood through the concept of biopolitics, plus the institutional responses of the Palestinian Authority. We are surrounded by very smart people, Nazar.
Nigel, can you tell us your highlight thus far from the conference?
Yeah, I think my highlight might be Peter Slezak's talk and his point that we have on our side as BDS activists truth, justice and decency. It's a peaceful struggle for rights and a free speech movement. And the misrepresentation of our movement to the contrary is just on so many levels plain ridiculous. I think my takeaway point would be the fact that the conference could be held at such a major mainstream institution such as Sydney University, that we would be allowed to gather and organise under this banner at such a venue, and I take great encouragement from that as a big step forward, a significant step forward in our lobbying for the rights of the Palestinian people.
Thanks, Nigel. Rob, up next is one of our favourites, Peter Slezak, who is an Associate Professor in History and Philosophy at the University of New South Wales. Peter was co-founder in 2007 of Independent Australian Jewish Voices, which sought to widen the public discourse in support of Palestinian rights, especially within the Jewish community. Peter, thanks for joining us. Can you tell me what your highlight of the conference thus far has been?
Well, look, it's not any one highlight, the whole conference is a highlight. This is a fabulous and very important event. I mean, it's an enormous gathering. There's a very significant number of people have turned up for this event, and I think it's a landmark in the Solidarity for Palestine, where people are giving very exciting and interesting talks and exploring all the issues. And I think this is a signal of the shift in the public awareness of the issues and the way in which the understanding of the Palestinian human rights is coming to be a significant factor.
Excellent. And Peter, if you were going to share one takeaway to our listeners, an action from here, what would that be?
Look, I think the obvious insight from this is that, firstly, the boycott movement is gaining in strength because it has the great advantage over the adversaries that we stand for human rights and justice and dignity, and that's something you can't argue with. And clearly the whole conference is just reinforcing that as the strength of the Palestinian cause, despite the forces against it, which are significant. But in the end, if you have the justice and truth on your side, that can't be defeated in the long run.
Thank you, Peter.
Dr. Robert Austin gained a PhD in History and Latin American Studies. His research areas are the post-colonial history of Latin America and the Caribbean and the political economy of Latin American culture. He has over 100 publications in the field and has been a professor at 2 Chilean universities and visiting professor in Chile, Cuba, Mexico and Venezuela.
Robert, I wonder if you could tell me your highlight of the conference thus far.
Well, the general standard of debate has been, in my view, very good, and the presentations, with few exceptions, have been exceptionally well organised. The highlight to date, however, of the paper that I think draws elements together in a delightfully clever way is the paper that we've just heard from Professor Ghassan Haj from Melbourne. In that, it talks to ordinary people, people who work in areas of all kinds, about the importance of confronting this obscenity, which is the Zionist occupation of Palestine. And on the other, it goes to the realm of ideas and makes us challenge some of our suppositions about what victimhood is, about what empirical analysis is, what its limitations are, the differences historically between the 19th and the 20th century in particular, which I take as a helpful bucket of cold water. I think we need these sorts of challenges.
Fantastic. And Robert, if you were going to give our listeners one takeaway from your time so far?
Well, it's a wonderfully diverse conference. We've seen papers from trade union areas, from areas of frontline teaching, from areas of frontline thinking, from well and truly outside of areas that are normally thought of as having to do with Palestine, such as what I presented yesterday on the great struggle in the journal Latin American Perspectives to adopt the PACB statement. The conference, it seems to me, has a very overall and general highlight of that nature, that it's drawn together a very broad spectrum of people who wish to see a better world, and in particular are focused in that struggle on Palestine, and challenged us to rethink the way we're doing it. And I, for one, feel far richer as a result of this, far richer as a result of having to rethink some assumptions. And I suspect, given the reception to the last speaker, it's probably a fairly wide sentiment.
Associate Professor Roger Markwick is the head of the School of Humanities and Social Science at the University of Newcastle. Roger is a professor of modern European history and founding member of the Centre for the History of Violence.
Roger, can you share with us your highlight of the conference thus far?
For me, as an academic historian, the highlight really is seeing a gathering of both activists and academics, some of whom are both, gathered in the one spot to discuss, I think, really one of the burning issues, if not the burning issue of our time. So to see an informed, interested, passionate discussion, all of which means, and I say this particularly as an academic historian, it means that we have a gathering of people who are willing to stand up and take up an issue that in many respects, that is, the Palestinians and their plight under the iron heel, I can only put it that way, of Israel. That, I think, is for me an experience to be treasured, to be prized. I think as a collective, this is a really important event, and I think I can only see good coming from it.
Great, Roger. And a takeaway, if you're going to share one thing with our listeners from the conference, what do you think you'd share?
The importance, I think, of people who have concerns about the state of our world actually acting on those concerns and meeting with like-minded people to consider, discuss, to organise how best to meet the challenges of our time. In this case, the particular fate of the indigenous people of Palestine, but the same principle could apply to many other issues that face our world, our country, Australia, right now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Roger.
Samah Sabawi is a multi-award-winning poet and playwright. Our listeners know about her play, Tales of a City by the Sea, which won 2 Drama Victoria Awards for Best Production and Best Publication of the VCE in 2016. Amongst many other activities, Samah is a policy advisor for the Palestine Policy Network Al-Shabaka and a PhD candidate at Victoria University.
Can you tell me what your highlight thus far of the BDS conference is?
There's been so many highlights, but what comes to mind right away is Nick Raymer's presentation yesterday on the academic boycott and the arguments for and against, and he made some really amazing and clear points, and so that was, for me, that was the highlight, is just listening to his presentation.
Emeritus Professor Stuart Rees is an Australian academic, human rights activist and author who founded the Sydney Peace Foundation. He is Emeritus Professor at the Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of Sydney in Australia. He has been described as one of the most humane voices of our generation, a writer always committed to passionately illuminating questions about social justice and to crafting answers to the biggest question of all, what it means to be human.
I was just going to say before we put the interview on, he had some of the greatest questions at this place, at the BDS conference. He is one hell of a funny guy and smart. I really enjoyed it.
Looking forward to listening to what he had to say.
What is your highlight of the conference?
I think the account of the Christian churches identifying exactly what actions they've taken, but it also paradoxically included the comment that they're also going backwards, that a few years ago they were optimistic and now conservatism in different walks of life and in particular in churches has taken over. So me learning that and being therefore more politically aware is about that issue is crucial.
And if you were going to give our listeners one piece of advice, what would it be?
It would be about talking about human rights, talking about fairness, and asking people why they collude with the appalling cruelty towards the Palestinians and others. Why do they think they might like to make cruelty a significant part of their lives?
Next we have Tim Budge, who is the Executive Officer of the Palestine-Israel Ecumenical Network. Tim has extensive background in organisational change and development and in international aid, with years of experience of visiting occupied Palestine.
Tim, the conference thus far, can you tell us a highlight for you?
Gee, I think the general highlight would be the amount of energy and positivity here. This is a group of committed, enthusiastic, energetic activists, and it's just so refreshing and rewarding to be in a space where people are like that. I guess there's a buzz here that I really appreciate.
Fantastic, Tim. And a takeaway, if you want to share one thing with our listeners that you've learned, what would that be?
Takeaway for me is that we're on the winning side. You know, history is going to, I think, prove that BDS is the right strategy, and it will make a difference. We can see already, and that's been brought out in the conference, that it is having some kind of impact. And I think it's, the takeaway is that we need to keep doing more of the same and redouble our efforts in terms of what we're doing around BDS.
Thanks, Tim.
Yusuf Munayir is a Palestinian-American political analyst and writer. He is the executive director of the U.S. campaign for the Palestinian rights. He is a regular commentator in the print and online media in the U.S. and overseas, and has frequently appeared on broadcast media including CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, Al Jazeera English. He has a PhD in government and politics from the University of Maryland.
Can you share with our listeners your highlight of the BDS conference this weekend?
There were so many different important topics that were addressed here. It's hard to really focus on one, but I think the most important takeaway that I have from this conference is the fact that it actually took place, which is no small feat in and of itself, given the amount of repressive efforts that are being undertaken right now by the Israeli state and their supporters in countries around the world to try to prevent convenings like this and conversations about BDS from even taking place. And I think the fact that this conference did take place here at this important institution in Sydney and had the kind of attendance and robust participation from really great presenters is a benchmark in the progress of BDS efforts in Australia, and would be looked back on in the future as an important moment in the growth of the movement here. Everybody has a role to play, and there are many ways to address how you are involved. And by that, I mean we should not simply look for ways to get involved, but begin realizing the ways in which we are already involved in the choices we make on a regular basis that are supporting the economics of the situation on the ground, which is denying the basic rights of Palestinians. The decisions that we make in our capacity as individuals, as members of communities, as members of organizations, institutions, which are complicit in these abuses through their investments, through their their ties, through their relationships with the Israeli state, everybody can have an impact in addressing that relationship, and any way in which you can get involved is a step forward.
With this, we have come to the end of another edition of Palestine Remembered, an episode that was totally dedicated to the BDS conference in Sydney. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to tune in next Saturday for a special episode on the Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish. Until then, have a great time and salam.